Hey guys, it's CreepsMcPasta. I know I don't typically make videos that are out of character, but this time, I have no choice. For many years now, I've been left comments on my videos from some of you saying, "Please Creeps, read Jeff the Killer," and "Please oh please, read Jeff the Killer, it's the scariest creepypasta ever." And for a while, I just ignored it. I had even mocked the story from time to time, but that all changed last night. For years, I thought the story of Jeff was just a story. I could have never imagined it might be true. It was 12 AM when I began to grow bored of playing Overwatch for the third day in a row with no sleep. Nothing was in my belly besides liters of Mountain Dew and at least 3 or 4 bags of Doritos. I had lost count of the calories days and days ago. I was playing with a few friends of mine, Creepypasta Jr. and Mr. Creepypasta, when Jr. started telling me about the deep web. See, for a year or so now, I just thought the deep web was a rumour or some work of online fiction, but he claimed that he had been on there and explained it to me step by step. Though, he warned me saying,
"Seriously, creeps, do not go there. Some of the content might not be suitable for someone with your mind."
My mind? I thought. What does he mean by that? I looked over to my waifu body pillow for advice. She always knew what to say. With just one look, she calmed me down and urged me to leave the session before I grew too angry. For another hour or so, I kept thinking how I wanted to prove him wrong, that I can go on the deep web. "I'll show him," I shouted, droplets of spit flying from my mouth and landing on my screen. So, I did it. I went on the deep web. At first, it was confusing. I guess the deep web is a lot bigger than the regular internet you and I go on. After an hour or so of searching, nothing really seemed to scare me. I was expecting something horrifying after what Junior had made it out to be, but for the most part, it didn't seem that bad. Just a bit slow when you loaded a different page. That was until I found a website called Smile For Me. The website had a dark red background that looked like it had been made in MS Paint, and in the middle of the screen read the text, "Do you want to smile?" with a yes or no clickable option. Hell yeah, I thought. Being the brave, badass adventurer I am, I leaned forward and squinted to see through the layer of Cheeto dust covering my monitor and clicked yes with as much force as I could muster. I damn near broke my mouse. It then loaded a picture of a girl, a very attractive one at that. My cheeks grew red with embarrassment and I could feel my nose beginning to bleed. I quickly looked over my shoulder to check on my waifu. Luckily, she was fast asleep. She's kind of the jealous type and I didn't want to give her the wrong idea about this girl. The picture soon began to distort and change, and soon there was a smile across the girl's face. Not just a regular smile, but one that looked as if it was cut into her cheeks from ear to ear. And then, boom, a blood-curdling scream sounded from the page and the screen went black. Just as I was about to nope the hell out of there, a new window popped up. A chat room that wanted me to make a username. Though part of me wanted to leave, the other part still wanted to prove that I was able to handle the deep web. So I didn't let it get the better of me. That was my mistake. I changed my username to Dick Richard Johnson. It's a play on words if you couldn't already tell. After I set my username, it let me in. There was only one other guy in the chat with the username Jeff the Killer. I made the logical assumption that this person must have been a Creepypasta fan. I typed in the chat, "Hello Jeff, Creepypasta fan are you?" He then typed back, "Creepy what?" I laughed out loud. Hard. That's when I realised I hadn't brushed my teeth in some time. I would have been embarrassed if anyone was in the room with me, but luckily it was just me and my waifu. "Come on, It may be my first time on the deep web, but I'm not that gullible, I responded. He replied as fast as lightning, saying, Not sure what you're talking about. Oh, come on, I continued. There is no way your username is Jeff the Killer and you're not a Creepypasta fan. But I am Jeff the Killer, he replied. I was shocked. Could this be true? Could it? I mean, there was no way that old story had any truth to it. Or was there? Well, if you are who you say you are, then prove it to me, I demanded. And how would I do that? He asked. Send me a picture of your face. If you are Jeff, then you must have that infamous face with a Glasgow smile and bleached skin. He quickly responded with an, okay. I waited and waited, with each passing minute feeling like hours. I had almost given up, saying, I knew this guy was a fraud. There was no way he could be the real Jeff. I stopped in the middle of my sentence the moment an image loaded on my screen. What I saw shook me to my core. I had to hold my hands over my mouth to withhold my vomit. There he was, staring back at me. A picture of Jeff the Killer with a timestamp and date to prove it was real. He then replied again. Go ahead, do a reverse Google image search. Nothing will come up. So I did, and just like he said, nothing came up. I knew at this point I was dealing with the real Jeff the Killer. I typed back as fast as I could, and ignoring the stench that wafted from my mouth. Please, I don't want any trouble. He quickly responded with, Oh, there's going to be trouble. It's time for you to pay. I tried as fast as I could to exit out of the page, but it wouldn't let me. I tried shutting my computer off, but it wouldn't let me. Instead, words popped up on my monitor saying, It's time for you to go to sleep. I know who you are. At that, I threw my monitor across the room hastily and unplugged my PC.
Babe, what's going on?
My waifu asked, having roused her from sleep due to the crashing of my monitor against the wall. I quickly screamed back, Shut up! I'm trying to think here! I soon snapped out of it. It wasn't like me to snap at someone like that, especially my own beautiful waifu. Wait, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. And just like that, she gave me the cold shoulder. Nobody could be as cold as her. Nobody. At that moment, I knew I was on my own. That's when my cell phone began to ring. The number read 666-666-666. I didn't even think a number like that was possible. I thought to myself, should I dare answer? Just as I was about to let it go to voicemail, all I could think was Junior laughing at me when he finds out I chickened out on the deep web. I could already hear him telling me, I told you so. I knew then and there that I wasn't going to quit. Just as the phone hit the last ring, I picked up. Hello? I asked, my voice cracking prepubescently. Mr. Killer Man, are you there?
Oh, I'm here all right,
he answered.
I'm here and I'm going to get you. I know you aren't really Dick Richard Johnson. I know you're actually CreepsMcPasta.
My heart stopped. I threw my phone against the wall and watched as it shattered. I heard footsteps as though someone was coming down into my room here in the basement. But luckily, it was just my mom. I screamed, Get out of my room! And she proceeded to leave. I did what I had to do. I didn't want her to get involved in this mess I had caused. I knew Jeff wasn't going to give up that easy. So I spent the rest of the night preparing for what I assumed would be a duel with Jeff himself that only one of us would survive. Luckily, I've been watching Naruto for years, so I could handle myself in a fight. The stairs creaked once again, and I yelled, "Mom, I told you to leave me be!"
Oh, I'm not your mother. I'm your worst nightmare.
It was Jeff. Before I could even react, he was already down the stairs and attacking me. I took punch after punch from him. I'm ashamed to admit that I couldn't even get one good hit on the guy. At this point, I was on the ground and Jeff was still wailing on me. I was about to give up when I saw something in the corner of my eye. It was a picture of me and my waifu that I had framed last Christmas. I could hear a voice in the back of my mind telling me,
Get up.
Get up, damn it.
Get up.
Come on, get happy.
It took all of my might, but I soon rose once again to my feet. Jeff looked shocked, almost scared. I could see it in his eyes. "That's the best you can do?" I asked, spitting out a blood-filled loogie. He chuckled at my determination.
You've got guts, kid. I can't wait to tear them out.
Our epic battle once again continued, though I was still losing. But I had something he didn't have. I had hope. Though it's hard to keep onto hope when you're getting the living crap beaten out of you. I'm proud to say I held on to hope for maybe 30 or 40 seconds before I crawled into a ball and began to cry. Jeff kicked me over and over again before he grew tired and maybe just bored. He looked down and said,
Come on, man. It's no fun if you don't get up. This is just pathetic.
I looked up, tears streaming down my face, and choked out, "Pathetic is my middle name." Wham! He kicked me right in the head and I fell unconscious. I woke up hours later in a dark room. I had no idea how long I had been out. I tried to move, but I was tied to a chair. I didn't even bother to scream for help, as I knew there was no point. I had accepted my fate. Then, out of the darkness appeared Jeff, his face so bright white it practically illuminated the room.
Good morning, CreepsMcPasta.
He greeted me.
I almost thought you were never going to get up.
"Well, looks like you were wrong," I replied, my voice low due to the immense pain I was suffering. Luckily, it sounded badass. He chuckled.
Yeah, I guess I was. Now that I have your attention, I'd like to make a deal with you.
A deal? What kind of deal could this guy possibly want to make with me? "Go on," I urged.
See, for years now, you have been mocking me online and refused to spread the word of Jeff the Killer to your subscribers, but that all changes today. See, I'm going to let you live, and I'll even let you go home on one condition,
he said. "And what might that be?" I asked.
I want you to make a video. Not just any video, a video about me, and how I conquered the mighty CreepsMcPasta.
I laughed. "That's it? That's all you want me to do? Alright, fine."
Well, there is one thing.
He chuckled darkly. That leads us to here, and why I'm making this video. I'm sorry everybody, but I wasn't strong enough to beat him. It saddens me to admit when I came home, my sweet waifu was gone. She left a letter saying how she loved me but deserved better. So, I'm alone now, in my basement. Alone with just my microphone and computer. My monitor's cracked in 3 different places, but it still works. Before the video ends, there is one more thing I have to say. The final part of the deal with Jeff was for me to reveal that... This pains me to say, but I, CreepsMcPasta, admit that Jeff the Killer is the greatest creepypasta ever told. Please God, forgive me. When I was young, it was every kid's dream to go to Disneyland. The advertisements raged on constantly between Saturday morning cartoons, and the summer holidays were coming up, so you know every kid was asking their parents to take them, and you know I was one of them. My parents always kept quiet about it, never giving a straight answer. I was close to giving up on the dream of going to the Magic Kingdom until they pulled me aside before the end of the school term. "Adam," they said, "we've been hearing great things from your teachers this year, and your grades have improved so much. We're very proud of you, so we saved some money aside and we're taking you to Disneyland." How should a kid react? Thank their parents politely and profusely? Express their love joyously? Well, being 8 and having a low emotional constitution, I simply broke down and cried. It was the happiest moment ever that I can remember, and will probably never be topped. How can you ever top such wholehearted, innocent childhood glee? The time just slipped by until we were on the plane to Paris. Life was a happy blur until the vivid memory of the magnificent entrance to the park. It was everything any kid could wish for. I tried my best to do everything. Honestly, the energy kids have is astounding. Looking back, my parents must have been heavily exhausted trying to keep up, yet they never faltered, knowing it was bringing me lasting joy, and for that, I am grateful. However, it had cost them a pretty penny for the whole trip, and one memory stands out to me, which is the reason why I'm telling you this. We were at the gift shop, and they were picking up various merchandise and suggesting we buy it as a souvenir. Everything they picked up was simple little trinkets, little keychains, fridge magnets, and other little pieces. I wasn't having any of it. It wasn't enough to encapsulate my feelings for the trip. I kept going back to an intricate glass figurine of a beautiful Disney character. I can't even say which one because it's been so long, and there's a more detailed part of this story that is more ingrained in my memory. The figure cost around €120, which was a lot for the time. Way too much for my parents. They obviously said no every time. And this next part saddens me. I became irate. Yeah, I was one of those kids. Kicking and screaming and pointing at the thing I wanted, being very loud and obnoxious. I still remember the embarrassed look on their face. We left without buying anything, and I was left with no souvenir. Or so they thought. What they didn't know is later that day, I went back in the shop. I was 8, so I was small enough to duck behind shelves without looking too suspicious. I reached over to the figurine and hid it in my Mickey Mouse hat. I looked over to the shopkeeper. He was busy with a customer. The other customers didn't notice. I thought I got away with it, until I noticed far out of the door there was a mascot facing my direction. At first, I thought he saw me, but in my mind, I figured he couldn't have. I reasoned that the visibility in those things were terrible, and that he was probably just facing the store because he was trying to attract new customers in, and thanking customers who left. When I walked past, he simply turned his head as I made my way back to my parents. He made no attempts to confront me. Past then, my memory fades. I simply went back to being a kid in school, sharing memories with the other kids who'd managed to go for the holidays, and scoffing at the kids who never managed to go. It's an amusing concept looking back, but it created an almost serious dichotomy back in the day. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I started seeing some weird things happen. It was small at first. I would be playing in the schoolyard, and from behind a tree far off in the distance, I would see what I thought was a thin black arm with a novelty-sized white glove slit behind it. A strange sight to see. However, there were white pigeons in the area, and it was dark in that part of the woods, so it was easy to explain away. And this continued from then on. Each time I would rationalize it in my mind. However, it didn't take long until it was getting harder to do so. Sometimes I would see the top of two black domes hiding behind a wall, before slipping down out of sight. I would peek over to see what it was, and see nothing, with nowhere anything could hide. I tried being faster, however, I could never catch a full glimpse of the thing. There was one thing I could piece together though. Based on all the parts I'd seen hiding, it was definitely a Mickey Mouse mascot. The one instance that really scared me, so much so I started screaming, was at night when I was tucked in bed. I turned my head nonchalantly, and through my window I could see the iconic Mickey Mouse ears and the top half of its eyes. This was the most I'd ever seen of its face, and I instantly panicked. I did everything under a kid's arsenal to get help. I ran around, I screamed, I cried, I made as much noise as possible. In record time, my parents ran in and tried to calm me down. They kept asking what happened, and all I could do was point to the window and garble out a mess of sounds. We all turned to the window and saw nothing. From then on, I was actively scared of anything Disney. Other kids would have their Disney toys, and I would shy away. They would bring up the Disney movie they saw the night before, and I would try to turn the conversation to another topic. I got rid of anything I had that was remotely Disney. Anything to ease my mind and erase the trauma I had experienced. It never worked, but it helped. After that, things calmed down. I feel I would be close to seeing something disturbing, but it would be out of sight as soon as my eyes focused. Still though, it never eased the paranoia, something that haunted my everyday. I felt I was getting close to forgetting all this, and living with a residing feeling after that traumatic evening until in high school, when my best friend's birthday was coming up. Disney was still a popular topic, despite us having grown up since the hype. He decided to organize a Disney trip and bring 2 friends. One of those kids that had parents who could afford to do such grand gesture. I tried to deny the invitation, but he was my best friend and wouldn't take no for an answer. I tried getting my parents to pull me out, but they thought I was just nervous about the flight. So, it wasn't long until I was boarding a flight to my literal nightmare. The group consisted of my best friend, one of his friends, his parents, and me. As soon as we settled in, we were off to have our grand adventure. It didn't take long until we split up to do our own things for a bit, with a time and place to meet up afterwards. I strolled around the park, trying to mind my own business and avoid the mascots. It hadn't been so long that I was ready to let my guard down in front of them, despite the friendly setting. It was odd, but every time I walked past the mascot, I swear they would briefly drop what they were doing, whether they were promoting merchandise or talking to a kid, and just stare at me as I passed. They just turn their heads slowly, their novelty-sized eyes glaring at me, cold and dead. At night, I tried to feel safe. I locked my door, tucked under my blanket, and tried to sleep the night away. However, I couldn't. The light seeping in through the open curtain perturbed me, and briefly reminded me of that night so long ago. I figured it couldn't happen again if I fully shut my curtain, so I went over to do so. As I grabbed each side to draw them shut, I noticed something in the distance. Standing in the middle of the grounds, completely in the open, was a mascot. It was Mickey, just standing there. If it wasn't so far away, I could have sworn it was looking at my window. I stared for a bit. It was just glaring, unmoving, disturbing. My heart started to race. I was scared to look away, but eventually I developed a resolve and pulled the curtain shut as hard as I could. I raced to my bed and wrapped myself so tight that any childish fear couldn't penetrate, and I slept to the gentle sound of something soft brushing my window, and what I fear now was heavy breathing. In the morning, I woke up exhausted. My friends, on the other hand, were sprightly awake and ready for a day of action. Obviously, I tried bringing up the night before, but you can never fully convey anything as simple as a mascot standing, unmoving in a theme park without getting the simple answers. It was probably just an empty costume left out. It was probably a mascot on break. I was probably just dreaming it. Seems it's easy to believe the simple solutions than to humour the terrifying one. I stayed alert for the rest of the trip, pretending to enjoy the place around my friends and the parents, and keeping a low profile while alone. It felt like an eternity, but I made it home in one piece. I want to say things calmed down from here, but they didn't. It got worse. The mascot that haunted my childhood seemingly stopped bothering to hide. I would catch it just standing out in the open, taunting me with its presence. When my parents drove me to school, I would catch glimpses of Mickey facing the direction of the car between alleys. While out shopping, it'd be standing behind a moving crowd, slowly holding out its hand, before fading away behind the hustle. I distinctly remember one instance in my mum's office building. It was some learning experience week at school, and I decided to work as a runner in my mum's office for a week. The elevators there had those narrow porthole windows to view each floor as you passed. While in a group, they functioned exactly as intended. However, in the brief instance I was alone, I saw snapshots of Mickey flash by each floor. I freaked out at this, terrified for my life, dreading the time in which the elevator would stop. The worst was at night. If I forgot to close my curtains, I would just see that horrifically sized head just staring at me through the window. I couldn't call someone. Why bother? It'd just slip away as soon as they came. Trying to take a picture ended in the same result. A running motif over time was his hand. I would sometimes see him either raising it, palm side up, or it would already be held out, almost as if it wanted something. It didn't take me long to think of a solution. The figurine. I frantically rummaged through my old childhood items, toys, books and the like. Nothing Disney. Of course, I got rid of everything as a child when I was terrified for my life. I no doubt had gotten rid of the figurine. I was mortified at this thought. My next idea was a simple one. While at the school library, I googled the exchange rate of the euro for the year I went to Disney and scraped up my pocket money. I had the right amount, so I did something any other kid would think is crazy. I left it out on my doorstep. I know that anyone could take it, but if it was gone in the morning, I'd at least have some hope it would appease this nightmare. I left the notes on the doorstep under a note apologizing for what I did. I placed a small rock on it to keep it from blowing away, and I went to bed. That night, I did something that terrified me as a kid. I slept with the curtains open. I wanted to wait until it was night and see if that horrific icon would be staring at me. I woke up in the dark hours of the morning. I took a few deep breaths for courage, closed my eyes with a quick prayer, and spun around to check. Nothing. Was it over? Have I managed to end years of torment? I walked over to my window to see if there were any signs of the thing, gaining steady confidence with each step. I was excited to live a life without flinching at every possible hiding spot. Excited to leave the house confidently. Excited to have my independence back. This all ended when I stared into my garden. There it was, standing, staring as it did in my second trip to Disney. I stared back, not only in horror, but sadness. Sadness that my newfound confidence and excitement was crushed so quickly. As I looked on, it raised its hand, and that's when I realized something. Maybe it's not holding its hand out for the item back, or any kind of repayment. Maybe it's holding its hand out for me. I know this sounds insane, but I may take it up. Maybe it wants to tell me something, or even show me something. Whatever the case, I needed all this down before I went. If this ends here, presume the worst. If you are listening to this right now, it is necessary that you get out of your house immediately. I don't know how or why this is happening, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not safe for anyone to be listening to this inside right now. Get in your car, get to the nearest town or city, and listen to it there, because I don't know how much longer it is until that thing comes around for you or anyone else. I don't know what this creature is, what it wants, or how many of them exist. All I know is that it is driven to kill, and will stop at nothing to make sure it gets its job done. If you fail to follow these directions, at least lock all your doors and windows, turn off the lights, stay somewhere safe, and make sure your presence is not known. Once you have done that, continue listening to this, and I will explain what is happening to the best of my knowledge. One night, I was sitting at home watching TV. It was a rough week, so I was glad that the weekend finally came. I could sit around doing nothing and not really care about anything. Everything seemed normal, or so I thought. But while I was watching TV, I noticed something odd. Coming out of the forest in my backyard was a man. Well, I'm not sure I could exactly call it that. He was about 5 feet tall, pale white, completely naked, and had very long arms. And I mean very long arms. They were dragging behind him like dead weight, and the way he walked almost made it seem like they were a burden to him. His hands were dragging a very large object behind him that I could not see at the time. As he took each step, I noticed that he walked with a very lumbering motion. Each step seemed to drain the very light out of him. I almost wanted to help it. That is, until I saw its face. As it got closer to me, I saw that where his eyes were meant to be, there was nothing but 2 glowing red dots, resting in swollen sockets on his face. He had no nose, and he lacked lips as well. His mouth was stuck in a very wide grin, and his teeth were very large. That is to say, if they were teeth. They were more like nails, protruding from his bleeding gums. It had long, jet black hair that almost touched its waist. The thing paid no attention to me, dragging whatever it was carrying behind it like it was his eternal duty. I could hear soft panting. I saw fog coming from its mouth after each breath due to the fact that it was the middle of winter. As he began to get closer to the house, I became more and more terrified. I quickly and silently shut off my TV, turned out my lights, and hid in my bedroom upstairs. I looked out my window and continued to watch his actions. During this, the creature now crossed my long backyard and made it to my house. At this point, I was finally able to see the horrific object it was carrying. In his arms, he was dragging the body of a young man behind him. I couldn't tell what the person looked like. He was too mutilated and torn up for me to be able to distinguish anything human about him. The creature then picked up the body and hung it against the wall with a meat hook, which was already pierced through the man's blood-drenched head. I nearly vomited at the sight of this. The creature walked backwards, stretching out its arms and letting out a subtle yawn. It was as if it had finally completed a very hard task. It walked up onto my back porch, its pace quickening after it had hung up the body. I waited in silence and terror, the only noise coming from my quickly beating heart pounding against my ribcage. Then, it looked up at me, and its smile widened. I jumped back in horror as it stepped closer to my back door. It reached out its long arms and grabbed a hold of my doorknob. It slowly pushed open my back door and stepped inside. At this point, I was too stunned to do anything but lock my door and move to the corner of my room. I cowered under a blanket like a child and waited in fear. I knew that I was next. I heard it climbing up my staircase, making as little noise as possible. When it reached the top of my staircase, it stopped for a moment, as if contemplating how to mutilate me. Then, it grabbed a hold of the doorknob and began to shake it violently. It kept shaking the doorknob, hoping to break in, but to no avail. I heard the creature walk down the stairs and head out my back door. I watched the creature as it slowly sulked back into the forest. I waited for a few minutes, in case it came back with some kind of axe to chop down my door. I must have waited in my room for half an hour before I finally decided it was safe. I quickly ran down the stairs and out of my house. I got into my car and drove out of there as fast as I could. Whatever that creature was, I didn't want to be around it when it came back. I went to the nearest town and rented a hotel. I stayed there for the night, and I decided I would report the incident to the police in the morning. I wasn't sure they would believe me, but it was better than getting framed for a murder I didn't commit. The next day, I got up and drove to the police station to report the murders to the police. Right as I entered the station, however, I noticed everything seemed too calm. There were no missing person reports, no murder investigations taking place. It's as if the body I'd seen last night had never existed. It might as well have been my imagination too, because when I returned home, the body wasn't there. In fact, there was no trace that any of last night's events had happened. It was as if it was a dream. Yeah, that had to be it. It had to have been a dream. I probably just woke up frightened and ran out of my house in a panic. I kept telling myself these things, knowing in my heart they were not true. That night, I locked myself in my room and turned off my lights as soon as it got dark out. I wanted to make sure the thing had no idea of my presence. Though it was hard to go to sleep, I finally dozed off only for a short time, as I was awoken at around 1 in the morning to the sound of scratching. I sat up in my bed and looked out my window, careful to stay hidden. To my horror, the creature was back, scratching against my wall. It was like it wanted to get my attention. When I looked at the wall where it had placed the bodies last night, I saw 12 more in their place. Each one was hanging in a different, gruesome way. 2 people hung upside down from barbed wire wrapped around their ankles. Others were nailed to the wall. One man was hanging from his intestines, which had been very precisely removed from his body. I looked away from this terrible sight, waiting for the creature to put me against the wall with the rest of those people. It opened my back door and entered my house, this time quicker, as if it was more eager to add me to his collection. He climbed up the staircase and started shaking on my doorknob. He kept shaking it until it finally snapped and the door slid open. I watched as the monster's silhouette silently crept through my door. It knelt down next to me. At this point, I was too stunned to do anything, and I just sat there, waiting for my fate. It placed its hands on my chin and lifted my head up so that I was forced to look into its empty eye sockets. I felt its warm breath against my face, which smelled of blood. And then, to my surprise, it spoke. "Father." It spoke with a slow, raspy voice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This creature calling me his father, speaking almost like a child saying his first words. I never had a son, and I would know if I did have a son and it looked like this. It almost looked sad when it spoke. "Father, are you scared, Father? Why are you scared, Father?" I kept looking up at the creature in horror. What the heck was going on? Did this thing really think I was his father? I sat in awe and shock at this horrible thing. "Father, look outside." It took long breaths between each word, as if talking was a struggle. "I made a gift for you. Do you like it?" I forced myself to look out the window at the horrific artwork the beast laid out for me to see. The thing really looked at me for a moment as I contemplated an answer. In a shaky voice, I said, "Yes, I really love your gift." Its smile grew with excitement. It put my head down, and I watched it slowly leave the room. I sighed with relief and moved away from the doorway. Just as I did, however, the creature turned around and looked at me and said something that still, to this moment, causes me to fear for my life and everyone else's life. Its final words to me are the reason I'm getting this message out to everyone. As he crept out of my door for the last time, he said, "I am not done, Father. Stay here. I am going to get more people." He hasn't returned yet. For the past couple of weeks now, I've been noticing a few odd things in my apartment. It started off with food mysteriously disappearing from my refrigerator and pantry while I'd be away at work. I didn't think much of it at the time, since every now and then I'd lose track of my daily eating habits due to my busy schedule, so I simply brushed it off. Eventually, it didn't stop there, Almost every night, I could have sworn I could hear shuffling sounds coming from within the walls. And sometimes, when I got home late from work, I'd find both my computer and TV turned on, even when I distinctly remembered turning them off before I left. Strangely, the TV would always be tuned to the local news, and my computer search history would show several results for nearby takeout restaurants. Needless to say, it was freaking me out. The building I lived in had tight security, with officers frequently patrolling the area, and it was located in the part of the city where crime was pretty scarce. Considering that I've given a couple of my friends copies of my apartment key to make sure that I wouldn't misplace them, which I so often do, I thought perhaps that one of them was trying to mess with me. I was eager to get to the bottom of this, so I asked if either of them were the culprit. However, they both blatantly denied it. This, of course, put me on edge, so I asked my landlord to check the security footage on my floor for any suspicious activity. He immediately began searching through 2 weeks of recorded footage, looking for any unfamiliar faces entering my apartment. He finished his investigation the following week and said that he's found nothing out of the ordinary. "There's nothing to worry about," he assured me. "It's probably all in your head, man." At the time, I was considering the possibility that maybe he was right. Being a domestic abuse lawyer, I've had to deal with a lot of stressful cases and work overwhelmingly long hours. Perhaps the numerous caffeine-fueled nights and constant headaches were starting to get to me. On one particular snowy day, I was coming down with a nasty cold and had to call in sick for the next few days. Despite having to reluctantly waste some of my days off on such a gloomy occasion, I was still glad to be temporarily free from my hectic obligations. It was around 7:30 and I was getting really tired. I had finally made it near my apartment on the 6th floor. I just got back from picking up some remedies at Walmart and was anticipating a nice, long night of peace and relaxation. Just as I stood in front of the door, I immediately heard a faint shuffling in the distances. My eyes scanned the hallway for any signs of life. Nothing. Suddenly, I could hear footsteps quickly creaking on a wooden surface. After listening in closely, I made a chilling realization of where these footsteps were coming from. Inside my apartment. This couldn't have been one of my friends, as I had recently changed the lock on my door due to all the strange things that have been happening. A sudden chill went up my spine, because I knew right then and there that an intruder had somehow broken in. At that moment, I felt really uneasy. I wanted to run downstairs and call for help, but I knew if I left the hallway at this point, the intruder would definitely make a break for it. Being the naive young man that I was determined to go inside, grab my gun, and try to apprehend whoever was inside. Taking in a deep breath, I slowly unlocked the door and creaked it halfway open. I was instantly hit with a powerful, ghastly odor that made me want to puke. It smelled like something had been decaying in there for quite some time. Ignoring it, I cautiously proceeded to the kitchen to grab the gun I kept hidden in the top drawer. I grabbed it and opened the lights. To my surprise, the first thing I noticed was several pizza boxes and takeout bags scattered across the ceramic tiles. This struck me as rather odd, because I knew I didn't order any takeout that day. I also noticed that there were food-covered footprints leading directly into the living room. Someone was definitely in here, and it looked like they were in a hurry to remain hidden from me. I slowly made my way to the living room with my gun at the ready. The footprints led right next to the boarded-up wall that was stationed on the other side of the room. There were a couple half of broken planks in the middle of it that I haven't gotten round to fixing yet. Very carefully, I walked towards the wall for a closer inspection. My heart was beating with every inch I took. I stopped walking around a few feet away from it and began closely examining it. I couldn't make out anything inside, so I moved my head in even closer to search for any signs of life. Again, nothing was completely visible, as it was pitch dark inside. So this time, I pulled out my phone, put it in the wall, and turned on the screen. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I saw two amber red eyes staring directly at me. My heart dropped like a rock. I quickly stumbled backwards, trying to keep my balance. A sudden rush of adrenaline swiftly filled my entire body. I quickly spoke in the most intimidating voice I could muster up. "If you don't get the hell out from there right now, I swear I'll blow your brains out," I exclaimed. Silence subsequently followed. I was half expecting some demented lunatic to rush out from there and attack me out of nowhere, so I prepared myself for an epic battle. "Didn't you hear me? I'm not messing around." Before I could finish my sentence, I was interrupted by a faint sobbing coming from within the wall. The intruder took a deep breath and spoke in a soft tone. "But please don't hurt me. I'm really sorry about what I've done," the intruder replied. The voice sounded like it belonged to a frightened little girl around the age of 13. This really wasn't the dramatic response I was expecting. I lowered my gun as the tension in the room quickly shifted to that of confusion. "Jesus, kid, you nearly scared me half to death," I said. "Who are you? And what exactly are you doing there?" No response. It seemed like my initial reaction shook her up a bit. "It's okay. You can tell me. I promise I won't hurt you." I slowly backed away from the wall to assure that I wasn't a threat. "See?" After a brief moment of silence, she replied once more. "My name's Maple," she said in a jittery voice. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I only wanted to get away from my mean parents." "Maple?" I paused for a minute, trying to recollect where I've heard that name before. Then it hit me. Maple was a little girl that went missing in the area several weeks ago. The media reported that she allegedly ran away from her home after her parents had physically abused her last Christmas. She must have slipped in my apartment when I forgot to lock the door that day. At that moment, I felt genuinely sympathetic, mostly because I've dealt with quite a few runaways in my line of work. The poor thing must have been scared to death. I guess when I ran out of food, she decided to break into my neighbor's apartment to help herself to their leftovers. She probably dropped all of it on the floor and made a break for it once she heard me come up to the door. I remembered at this point that there was a police car parked right outside the building. I figured that I should first try to comfort her before calling the cops over. "It's okay, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay," I assured her. "Just please, come out so I can make sure you're okay." She suddenly stopped sobbing and became quiet. Dead silence filled the room, as I anxiously awaited a response. She was almost starting to freak me out. After about a minute passed, she finally said something. "Okay, but could you first put the gun on the floor and come closer? I need help getting out." Her voice sounded slightly deeper this time. The sudden shift in tension kind of threw me off at first. I wanted to comply with her demands, but I had this strange, eerie feeling deep inside that something was off. At the time, I couldn't make out what it was though. Giving in to my paranoia, I thought it was best if I just left her there while I go get help. "Oh, actually, Just wait here, Maple. I'll be back soon with a... Wait, don't go! She interrupted in a surprisingly loud and desperate plea. The sudden outburst made my whole body flinch. You can't leave me here! My ankle, it hurts really badly. I think I twisted it when I slipped on the floor. I don't think I can get out on my own. You have to get me out of here right now. This place is really creeping me out. I hesitated for a moment. Believe me, I wanted nothing more than to help her out. But there was something about her tone that made me feel like she wasn't completely telling the truth. My intuition's usually pretty good at judging whether or not someone was lying, so I was inclined to follow my gut feeling. I'll only be a couple minutes. Hang in there, kiddo. I promise I won't be long. I quickly ran out of my apartment before she could say another word. After a brief elevator ride down, I sped across the hall, out of the spinning doors, and into the freezing weather. To my relief, I found a slightly chubby officer talking to his slim partner right across the street from me. I ran towards them, eager to tell them everything that went down. Before I could make it halfway there, however, I froze. My heart sank as I remembered something that will forever send a chill down my spine. I couldn't believe I didn't realize this until now. That couldn't have been the same missing girl, because last night she was found murdered a couple blocks away. Her lifeless body was discovered stuffed inside the wall of a vacant apartment. It was all over the news this morning. Struck in awe, I was left nervously wondering who the hell was hiding in my walls this entire time. I wasted no time as I rushed to the police and frantically told them everything like a nervous wreck. At first they all thought it sounded a bit sketchy, but after I persisted for a few minutes, they were finally persuaded to follow me and take a look. Without catching my breath, I ran back to my apartment with the officers following closely behind. When we made it to my living room, I showed them where the intruder was hiding. The chubby officer told me to step back, as they both drew out their guns and pointed them at the wall. This is the police. I want you to get out of there right this instant and put your hands on the ground. The officer's demands were met with silence. You have 5 seconds to comply, or else I'm dragging you out. Still nothing. The slim officer nodded, cueing his partner to go in. His partner pulled out a flashlight and slowly walked towards the wall with his gun still drawn out. I anxiously watched as he made his way to the wall and put his head inside. He began thoroughly searching both sides. Did you find anything? The slim officer asked. Nope, it's all clear, he replied. But I can tell someone's been hiding it. Before he could finish his sentence, he paused. He put his head in deeper for a closer inspection. Hold up, I think I see something. Judging by the surprise in his voice, I had a feeling that he was about to discover something really disturbing. I could feel it in my bones. What is it? His partner called out. The chubby officer took his head out of the wall and looked at his partner with a shocked expression. I think I can see a couple of bodies inside. Those words made my entire world turn upside down. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you sure about that? The slim officer asked. Yeah, I'm sure of it, he exclaimed. My God, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. These bodies, they look so mutilated. Just what the hell happened in here? The unsettling thought that I had just stood feet away from human corpses made my stomach turn. The powerful stench of decaying flesh made me want to puke my guts out. I knew right then and there that whoever had been hiding in my walls this whole time was definitely not a little girl. Help me break this wall down. One of them could still be alive. The slim officer put his gun in his holster and walked towards the wall. I watched from about 15 feet away as they both started breaking down the old planks one by one. They quickly tore off 3 rows of them with ease, while blood started pouring out in excessive amounts. Suddenly, out of nowhere, several lifeless bodies, dismembered bodies, fell right off the wall and onto the floor. My eyes grew wide with shock. Most of their flesh looked like it was violently bitten off, and their mutilated faces were completely unrecognizable. The disturbing thought of the immense pain these victims must have suffered through was simply too much to take in. Upon taking a closer look at the type of clothes they had on, I made a chilling realization of who they were. They were all food deliverers from several nearby restaurants. I could barely make out the restaurant logos on their violently shredded and blood-soaked shirts. I wanted to look away from the gruesome sight, but there was something above the bodies that had caught my eye. It looked like there was something written in blood on the inside of the wall. At first, I couldn't make out what it said through the darkness of the room, so I slowly walked closer to read it more clearly. My entire body shook to its very core the instant I realized what it said. "You're lucky you didn't do what I asked." I first met in person with Mary E. in the summer of 2007. I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed, since I was not a newsman, but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business, but at the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour, I sat with Terence as we camped outside the bedroom door. I listened and took notes, while he attempted to fruitlessly calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense, but fit into the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not, her objections to speaking with me centered around an incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recall that I wasn't a reporter in the search of a story, but merely a curious young man in the search of information. Besides, I thought at the time I could perhaps find another, similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the sysop for a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered Smile.jpg, and her life changed forever. She and Terence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was one of the estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS, though she's the only one who has spoken openly about the experience. The rest have remained anonymous, or are perhaps dead. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, Smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my burgeoning interest in web-based phenomena. Mary was the most often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as Smile.dog. The being Smile.jpg is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity toward such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people don't believe it even exists other than a rumor or a hoax. It is unique because though the entire phenomenon centers on a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly, many photo manipulation simulacra litter the web, showing up with the most frequency on sites such as the image board 4chan, particularly the X-focused paranormal subboard. It is suspected that these are fakes because they do not have the effect the true smile.jpg is believed to have, namely sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. This purported reaction in the viewer is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though depending on whom you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much out of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock sites such as Goatsy, hello.jpg, or 2 Girls 1 Cup. Any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is summarily deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are the stuff of internet legend. Mary E's story is not unique. There are unverified rumours of smile.jpg showing up in the early days of Usenet, and even one persistent tale that, in 2002, a hacker flooded the forums of human and satire website Something Awful with a deluge of smile.dog pictures, rendering almost all of the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s, that smile.jpg circulated on Usenet as an attachment of a chain email with a subject like, "Smile, God loves you." Yet, despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link has ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen smile.jpg often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drive. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of a camera, sits in a dim room, the only background detail visible being a human hand extending from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but is usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog, or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, and very human-looking teeth. This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims, who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the times they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue indeterminably, often while the victim sleeps, resulting in very vivid and very disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though in some cases it is more effective than others. Mary E., I assumed, was not on effective medication. That was why, after my visit to her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers to several folklore and urban legend oriented news groups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of smile.jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experiences. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits, since I had become my freshman year of college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. Subject: last summer's interview. Dear Mr. L, I am incredibly sorry about my behaviour last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realised that I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years, I've been haunted by smile.jpg. Smile.dog comes to me in my sleep every night. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that makes them completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move and do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see Smile.Dog. It talks to me. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a co-worker. I could even show it to Terence, as much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, if Smile.Dog kept its word, I could sleep. Yet, if it lied, what would I do? And who was to say something worse could not come for me if I did as the creature asked? So, I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.Dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years, I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board where I first encountered Smile.jpg stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They are the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L. But last summer when you contacted me and my husband about an interview, I was near the breaking point. I did not care if Smile.Dog was lying or not. I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connection with, and I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought, and in fact, I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope that this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved. Someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile.Dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself. While clearing up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. He was a man in shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He'd found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette had hissed as it melted, like some sort of animal, he said. I'll admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first I thought perhaps it was a joke, with the couple belatedly playing with the situation in order to get a rise out of me. But a quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided that, for at least a time, I would not further pursue the subject of Smile.jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has odd ways of testing up. Almost a full year after I'd returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. Subject: Smile. Hello, I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you are interested in Smile.Dog. I have saw it. It is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you here. Just spreading the word. Smiley face. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attached, called, naturally, Smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was most likely a fake, I imagined, and even if it weren't, I was never wholly convinced of Smile.jpg's peculiar powers. Mary E's account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. After all, how could a single image do what Smile.jpg is said to accomplish? What sort of creature was it that could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? And if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if Smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? And if I choose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my early intention to write a short article about Smile.jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence, and anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest, would be affected. And even assuming the Smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? If you're listening to this, then congratulations. You will soon be one of the few that know the truth, and by then I'll be likely gone. Not dead, just gone. Vanished, erased, snubbed out. Mark my words, it will happen. But before that day comes, I'm determined to share the information I have. Information that many would prefer to remain out of reach, but information the public deserves to know. I'll start with how I managed to get myself into this mess, right in the center of the spider's web. Apologies in advance for the hazy details, but I'm going to have to be vague to keep them off my trail for much longer. Anyway, to put it simply, I had hit rock bottom when they found me, homeless in the streets of Her Majesty's London without a single helping hand in sight. At the time, their offer seemed too good to be true. £100,000 sterling, I was told, with private healthcare, house and car thrown into. In hindsight, I should have realised it was. If you're not from the UK, but have ever visited London, you'll understand what I'm about to say perfectly. Doesn't it all seem a bit magical? The gold of the crown sprinkled on every street corner, postbox and lamppost, the palaces and towers that everyone visits eventually, with their guards, gates, and the presence of royalty only meters away, the Houses of Parliament and the London Underground, mundane and boring to those familiar with them, yet quirky and alluring to those from outside. One of my co-workers once described London as the Disney of capital cities, and I'll be damned if that isn't exactly what they want. Simply put, it is all a front for something much greater. When you visit London, they want you to make fools of yourselves, trying to make the Queen's Guard smile. They want you to buy into the excitement of royal weddings and to shake your heads at the parliamentary debates. They want you to read conspiracy theories about what happened to Princess Diana, and they want you to believe them. What is the truth? I don't know, and neither will any of you. The point is that you'll sit there and ponder and ponder, and never, for one moment, look deeper than that thin layer of magic. Because if you do, you may find another London entirely. Whatever I had first expected when I first signed the contract was nothing compared to the truth. My job was nothing special. I was a glorified cleaner, responsible for cleaning up after the All-Stars, picking up the trash and keeping my head down and mouth shut. If I recall correctly, the official term used was disposable employee, but I digress. When you work in Un-London, things are never that easy. Un-London is an enigma, something that hides in plain sight, yet remains concealed to the near-perfect degree. It is also worth mentioning that Un-London is only a nickname, used by those with no official business or importance there, and only spoken publicly by those with nothing to lose. Unfortunately, I am a member of both groups. Official names include SC Templar, SC1, SC Crown, with the SC standing for Sub-City and the rest standing for God knows what. I have reason to believe that similar facilities exist in many cities worldwide, with rumoured locations including the Paris Catacombs, the Vatican, and the city of Moscow to name a few, but I have no solid evidence to support these claims. Then again, procuring evidence against a secret of this magnitude is a near impossible task, so you'll just have to trust my word. Over roughly 9 months of my employment in Un-London, I stumbled across my fair share of sensitive information, not entirely by accident, but not outright deliberately either. Of course it wasn't easy. What other cleaning jobs do you know that force you through 2 months of psychological examination, interrogation, and conditioning before they let you near the place? And that isn't even including the security measures underground. Practically every door is magnetically sealed, openable only with the correct keycard that change daily and fingerprints. When on the job, there is never a moment when you aren't in the immediate vicinity of an armed guard, security camera, or narrow-eyed supervisor. When you aren't working, you're confined to your accommodation with every blind spot covered, every mirror two-way, and absolutely no phone service to speak of. Some call the UK the most watched country on earth, and they'd be right, because the streets of Un-London are that valuable. Moving on to the facility itself, Un-London isn't a single fortified location, but a labyrinth of disused chambers, passages and bunkers stretching beneath the City of London, particularly under and around the River Thames. You won't find them on any map, and they aren't accessible through any of the known areas available to the public, only through a handful of very specific entry points within the river itself and several mining standard elevator shafts in choice locations around the city. Don't bother asking where any of these entrances are, because I was unconscious and blindfolded during the journey for obvious security reasons. Believe it or not, the history of the facility is one of the few scraps of information they willingly give up to new employees, likely to create a false sense of lawfulness and security in a profession that is neither secure nor lawful. Un-London was first founded immediately following World War II in an effort to capitalise on the existing infrastructure of subterranean London. While everyone else was hopeful and looking to the light, they took it upon themselves to sink to new lows. Since then, the tunnels have expanded exponentially, as have the range of their functions, with their depravity and secrecy only growing with each passing decade. Let's just say that during my stint as a disposable, I saw the remnants of some mind-boggling, revolting, and disturbing things. I won't go into all the details to spare your stomach, but I'll give you enough for your mind to fill in the rest. After a few other disposables and I were once sent to clean up after a round of afternoon tea, cakes and substances too rare and secret to populate the government's banned substances register, not to mention the meat of animals on the endangered species list. Another cleaning session consisted of emptying an office following its occupant's suicide, marked for incineration, the order had said. I suppose by now you're wondering how I know all I do, and for that, I don't blame you. The life of a disposable is mostly just following orders from a faceless superior, trudging from one day to the next in silence and staying in the dark. For me, it was much of the same, until they chose to promote me. To understand my second job, you first need to understand the single biggest source of paranoia for the bigwigs behind London: the internet. A single cyber attack or intrusion could expose the truth behind their actions. So within London, no communication over the internet via phones or any equipment, modern or otherwise, is permitted. Good old-fashioned letters make up the vast majority of communication within the city, which are favoured exactly for their primitive, unhackable nature. Coupled with a near zero chance of any physical material escaping the city, and you can see the appeal. This brings me on to my second job within London: a courier. Hundreds of couriers are employed within the tunnels, scurrying back and forth for providing a never-ending stream of orders, data, and documents, the vast majority of which are marked classified, read once and then promptly sent to one of the several huge furnaces somewhere in the complex. But in secret, as time trickled by and hundreds upon hundreds of letters came under my supervision, I gradually built up my knowledge of the city, and it terrified me. I learned that the level I had been employed on was only the highest of 5, each more mysterious and secure than the last. I learned that many of the unseen figures we had heard whispers of were well-known celebrities, politicians, and intellectuals. And worst of all, I learned about the Fleming Protocol. What began as 3 words mentioned inconspicuously on an itinerary soon spiraled into a predicament that has me trapped to this day. Remember the term disposable employee? I first assumed it was intended to demean and frighten us, but in hindsight, I suppose it was naive to ever assume anything in my situation. Like I said, security is their single greatest concern, and it turns out someone like me, a nobody, salvaged from the bottom and trapped between the lines, is too great a threat for them to tolerate. Whether it's simply the cold nature of London or the fear that my kind has nothing left to lose, the fact is that I don't have long left. When I first began my conditioning, I was given a medical examination that included several different injections disguised as vaccinations. More naivety on my part, I suppose. Whatever they gave me, I can feel it growing stronger by the day, seething, throbbing, and sapping what little strength I have left. I know now that there will be no happy endings for me, no meal tickets to Easy Street, and no way out. They want their secrets to stay buried, trapped in legend and myth, never to see the light of day. I won't give them that luxury. So whatever the cost, I'm making my knowledge known by using my short debriefing period to do the right thing. To serve the public after so long serving the men in their high towers. Like I said, by the time you're listening to this, I'll likely be gone. So I'll leave you with one last piece of advice. Next time you hear of a sensational conspiracy or scandal too shocking to be true, or something you may immediately dismiss as improbable in the modern world, think of my story. Think of how much you really know about the backstreets and dark cellars of the world around you. And most of all, think about what you can do to bring those places into the light. After all rumors start somewhere. Every now and then, my thoughts drift towards the deaths of Leela and Raymond Howard. When that happens, a multitude of questions usually start to plague my mind. What could have prevented their demise? Did they suffer? How many chances to save them were wasted? How many warning signs were ignored? But what really pains me to know is, how did it all end? Note, the following is a true story. On Sunday, June 29th, 1997, elderly couple Leela and Raymond Howard from Salado, Texas, decided that they were going to a day festival in Temple, a nearby town. It was to be a 50-mile trip, and Leela was driving. The couple departed that morning, despite their earlier objections by Leela's son, who had begged to drive his mother and father himself instead. Leela declined, saying, "No, we know where to go. We go every year." Leela's son's concern stemmed from the fact that his 83-year-old mother was showing signs of Alzheimer's disease and was often easily confused at things. At one time, Leela even meant to show up at a local Walmart for a morning coffee at 10:30 a.m., but instead arrived at 10:30 p.m., perplexed at why the sun was not yet up. 88-year-old Raymond, too, was showing signs of mental deterioration due to a recent brain surgery done to combat a stroke and head injury. Leela and Raymond, though, were not aware of their severe mental decline and left for the festival that morning without even telling their other adult son, who lived just next door. The afternoon passed and the Howards didn't return home. However, at a local Walmart in Temple, agreed to there remembered seeing Leela and Raymond coming in for coffee during the afternoon. After that, the couple's movements could not be accounted for. The several children between the two had become immensely worried for their elderly parents' safety, so they contacted the authorities and a missing persons bulletin was posted that day. The Howards remained missing. 3 days later, on Wednesday, July 2nd, a newspaper article was published in the Austin American-Statesman about the missing couple titled, "Elderly Salado Couple Missing on a Trip to Nowhere." It read, "Leela and Raymond Howard are on a 4-day trip into thin air. The Central Texas couple, in their 80s with diminishing health, somehow have turned a 15-mile journey for a cup of coffee and a party into a 500-mile-plus misadventure with no known destination." The same day, a deputy in rural Arkansas pulled over Leela for driving with her headlights off, as it was nighttime. Leela and Raymond were 500 miles away from their original starting point in Salado, Texas. The deputy later noted that Leela was polite, gentle, and acted just like his grandmother. When Leela stated that they were trying to get back to Texas, the deputy noted that they were headed in the wrong direction if they were trying to return to that state, so he gave them directions. The deputy then asked Leela where she lived, but she could not remember. The deputy let them off with only a warning. The couple were pulled over again about half an hour later for driving with their high beams on. This deputy also let them go. Neither of the deputies knew about the newspaper article, nor that the Howards were missing persons. The Howards once again disappeared. The next day, on Thursday, July 3rd, there was another article about the Howards. They had allegedly been spotted at a farmer's market in Arkansas, and authorities in 11 states were on the lookout for them. On Friday, July 4th, another article stated that authorities had narrowed their search to 3 specific counties in Arkansas. There were no further developments in the search until Wednesday, July 9th, when the couple's story was covered on the CBS morning news show. Yet another newspaper article was published about the Howards in the Austin American-Statesman, making the front page. That article's editor, Denise Gamino, stopped by the Howards' house, and the signs of the couple's mental decay were obvious. There was folded clothing still laying on the couple's bed, as if they started packing for some sort of long trip. The television was unplugged, and hearing aids were left behind in the bathroom, as well as various toiletries. Even though the month was currently July, the Howards' calendar was still on the page for February. Perhaps most notably, the Howards' cat, Happy, was left behind. essentially abandoned. The couple's children and grandchildren were apparently unaware of how bad their parents' mental health had become. The search intensified as authorities employed dozens of deputies, carefully combed obscure backroads and bush areas, posted flyers, and questioned many civilians over a very large area. Helicopters were even later used in the search, and the search area grew to 1,000 miles from Salado, Texas. By then, one of the Howards' grandsons had offered a reward of $1,000 for his grandparents' safe return. Tips came flooding in after the CBS morning show, but none led to the Howards' discovery. The next day on Thursday, July 10th, one of the Howards' grandsons remarked in a newspaper article, "The hardest part is thinking that they are suffering or need us, and we can't get to them." Another bleakly stated, "I just don't think we're going to find them alive now." Unfortunately, everyone's worst fears were finally realized on Saturday, July 12th, when the bodies of Leila and Raymond Howard were discovered in their car by hikers at the bottom of a 25-foot cliff, just outside Hot Springs, Arkansas. Raymond was still in the passenger seat, but Leila was about 20 feet away in a ravine, still clutching her purse and car keys. Apparently, after the car went over the cliff, she put her car in park, turned off her headlights, opened the passenger side door for her deceased husband, and crawled away to die of her injuries sustained in the crash. There were no skid marks found at the top of the cliff, indicating that Leila's car had driven straight off the edge. A crash scene investigator estimated that the car had been going around 50 miles per hour on the stretch of road leading up to the cliff. Leila likely didn't see the cliff edge, or was in some other way distracted, or even became momentarily confused and lost the ability to safely drive. It is not known for how long the Howards' bodies remained undiscovered. Sadly, the crash site where Leila and Raymond's bodies were found was within a zone previously searched by the authorities, but searchers could not see the bottom of the cliff due to the excess brush in their line of sight. Leila and Raymond were later buried next to their respective first spouses. Austin, Texas songwriter Tony Scalzo read the July 2nd newspaper article in the Austin American-Statesman in the midst of the search for Leila and Raymond, and he became inspired. He wrote a song with his alternative rock band Fastball based on Leila and Raymond's disappearance. It was titled The Way. About the song, Scalzo said, "It's a romanticized take on what happened." Scalzo pictured them taking off to have fun, like they did when they first met. Scalzo wrote the song before Howard's bodies were discovered. The album containing The Way, All the Pain Money Can Buy, was released in 1998, 1 year after the Howard's bodies were found. Despite The Way's cheerful, optimistic sound, the lyrics are haunting. They made up their mind and they started packing. They left before the sun came up that day, an exit to eternal summer slacking. But where are they going without ever knowing the way? They drank up the wine and got to talking. They now had more important things to say. And when the car broke down, they started walking. Where were they going without ever knowing the way? Anyone can see the road that they walk is paved in gold. And it's always summer, they'll never get cold. They'll never get hungry, they'll never get old and grey. You can see their shadows wandering off somewhere. They won't make it home, but they really don't care. They wanted the highway. They're happier today. Their children woke up and they couldn't find them. They left before the sun came up that day. They just drove off and left it all behind them. But where were they going without ever knowing the way? My thoughts again returned to Leila and Raymond Howard barreling off that cliff in Arkansas. Unfortunately, I never seemed to get any answers for my questions. I suppose that I can only guess. Maybe Leela had seen the cliff edge, but didn't have enough time to react. I wonder if she even had the mental faculties to function anymore. It leaves me thinking, what was going through their heads as their car plunged off the cliff edge? Fear? Confusion? I'd like to think otherwise. Perhaps in that moment, it wasn't 1997 anymore. Maybe it was a much earlier time for them. Maybe their damaged psyches spared them from the sad reality. Perhaps in that moment, for Leela and Raymond, there were no more medications, no more hearing aids, and no more doctor's appointments. No aching joints, no glasses, no operations, no pacemakers, no forgetting, and no more confusion. Maybe in that moment, and for their entire trip, Leela and Raymond saw themselves as a newlywed couple, their young skin perpetually gleaming in the summer sun, Leela in her best white wedding dress, and Raymond in his finest black tuxedo. Maybe they envisioned a Just Married sign hanging on the back of their rear window, and empty soup cans tied to their rear bumper. I wonder if they held hands. Maybe when Leela and Raymond Howard drove off that cliff in Arkansas in 1997, they weren't scared. Maybe they were smiling. My eyes are in a fervorous affair with the clock, and my focus is none the wiser. The police dispatcher is pleading for me to humour her inquiries, if for no reason other than to keep my consciousness afloat. It is so late, and today has been so challenging. Nevertheless, I'll gratify her with my story, because I am really in no mood to tell it again later. Mariam Cliffington happened into our photo centre again today. These visits are becoming relentless, as are the innumerable poorly photoshopped images on a SanDisk flash drive. Every day is the same process. She purchases our photo kiosk, orders small batches of 5x7 and 4x6 photos, and croons over the photo printer as it squeals its mechanical protests. The unfortunate photo specialist on duty is then scolded by dear old Mariam as, "The colour in my son's face is coming out too pale," and "My daughter's dress looks much too washed out," becomes as recitable as the Lord's Prayer. The project is then gifted to me, as I am the only one who receives her limited mercy. This is due in part because I am the only one in the store qualified as a professional photo editor. I also look just like her son. At least that's what she tells me every time she swoons over the photos I correct. I personally never saw the extreme resemblance. We have similar Hollywood-esque hairstyles, dark stubble, light eyes, and a fair complexion. But that is where the similarities end. Well, that is my general assumption. Truthfully, I have never met him. According to Mariam, they don't get along so well these days. Reportedly, her son has become what she calls a changed person after he split with his wife. That always seemed odd to me, because nearly every day I am draining the red out of a new family photo that she zealously adds in her novice Photoshop sessions. It seems the family often stays in touch. Today we discussed more personal topics, such as my college degree and her family get-togethers. She told me she was celebrating her granddaughter Gracie's 5th birthday today, and was putting together a photo album and baked goodies to send her. Today's photo were of a girl from her previous birthday. She had straw blonde hair, her father's bright blue eyes, rosy red cheeks, and a devilish grin that strongly reminded me of the girl from the movie Problem Child 2. When the topic turned to me being a graduate in multimedia design, she immediately began to give me the shakedown on my talents as a web developer. She wanted me to build her a forum-based website just for her family. She wasn't fond of the public limelight social media granted, but wanted regular updates from her son, granddaughter, their prized show horses, and images from all the reunions they have over the years. I'm not a fan of Mariam. She may treat me in a more humane manner than my colleagues, but she is always so bitter. She carries an air of importance about her that mismatches who she is, like a pug in a sweater made of silk. The last thing I want from a client is a beady pair of eyes reflected behind ancient, dark-rimmed tortoiseshell glasses, with ignorant words laced with the smell of stale coffee and menthol cigarettes. Her grey-black hair was often wild and tangled, as if she was fleeing her home every morning to develop photos which contained the cure for cancer. Despite her lack of self-management, she saw herself as an expert in managing the talents of others. I never inquired about the specifics of her family problems, but I assume this attitude must cause the bulk of it. This sense of entitlement is something I don't blend well with. After endless barrages of questions about my rates, schedule, and ability to tutor her in Photoshop, I gave her my business card and told her to call me in a few weeks. Truthfully, I'm in my 2-week leave period and on my way to a better job, and this was a simple method to evade her until I would never have to see her again. She seemed content with my proposal and took my card. I told her to forward my congratulations to her granddaughter on her 5th-year milestone. As she shuffled out of our store, I looked again at the refuse pile of discoloured prints. If her family is so dysfunctional, why does she bring in new photos of her son and granddaughter every other day? Why, as a spitting image of the son she frequently quarrels with, am I so reasonably treated by her? Those suspicions came to fruition a few hours later when a 20-something couple dropped off a few rolls of 35mm film. They had matching black hair, the athletic builds of bicyclists, and eyes that reflected deep kindness but an even deeper sense of fatigue. The lab's business was running slow today, so I was immediately able to process their order and begin development. The development process is always the same. I feed just enough of the raw film through a machine to attach it to a leader card, which is mechanically guided through the film processor. After it completes its voyage and the developed film is fed through, I place it on the scanner of our printing machine and check the frames digitally for colour flaws and inconsistencies. The pictures showed the young couple celebrating another birthday. A boisterous banner which read, "Happy birthday, Mitch," hung above an electric blue neon minibar. The couple was shown holding beer bottles and laughing heartily. The entire set was quite like the photos most young couples bring in. There was a sloppy, drunken kiss here, someone air guitaring on the table there. I began to complacently press the print button after every 6 frames. Then I noticed a picture of Miriam's son. Even though I had never met him, I had seen that face often. It was a face that was branded into the back of my eyes, like the bright red digits of a digital alarm clock in the first few moments of morning consciousness. I was intrigued that these two may also be familiar with the eccentric woman who both frowned upon and adored her family. As I was packing up their photos and ringing up their orders, I decided to make conversation. "So, you know Marion Cliffington?" I asked casually. Silence. I glanced upward, and the glance became a fixture. A paleness and shock matched both the exhaustion they both wore in their eyes. "Are you okay? I recognize the son in your photos." The girl spoke, tears welling in her eyes. "That's our friend Mitch. Those photos were taken a few weeks ago. He passed last week. This order is for his funeral slideshow." Her boyfriend spoke next, clearly unsettled, but retaining his composure, as he quickly recited what I am sure he has gotten used to explaining. "He and his daughter were found dead in Miriam's home last Sunday, poisoned. The police have been seeking her for questioning. Have you seen her recently?" I was floored. I am rarely one to lose my cool, but I began tripping over my words like they were raised on a high wire. Yes, I mean, she was just here a few hours ago. She said she was celebrating Grace's 5th birthday. She's working on a new photo album. They were new photos." The girl spoke next. "We need to call the police immediately. Grace's birthday was the Tuesday before they were found. They didn't enjoy visits with Miriam, but she insisted on being with them to celebrate." Call them I did. I spent the rest of my shift, plus 2 extra hours, conversing with a police detective and the couple. He asked me to print out the information we had on Miriam, and if we had any ideas of her whereabouts. They inquired about the frequency of her visits, the types of purchases she makes from the rest of the store, her current appearance, and general abnormalities in her behaviour. I gave them what they needed, along with the security footage from the cameras we had hidden around the building. They gave me the direct line to their office, and sent me off with my assurance that I would call them immediately if Marion came into the shop again. The drive home felt relatively non-existent. The thoughts of what occurred seemed to dominate my sense of time while on the road. Had this lady, who compared me to her son, been responsible for his death? For the death of his daughter? Would I see her before the police? I arrived at my house in the same psychological state as when I left the store. I nearly broke my ankle while stumbling over a package that was placed in front of the entryway. I brought it inside, into the light, and saw that the sender's name was Mom. I wasn't sure what the occasion was, but I assumed it was a late Thanksgiving care package. Regardless, it was good to receive mail from her. I wasn't sure where her new apartment was. Now I had her address. 6312 Prospect Road. Inside the package was a thin box of cookies and a neatly wrapped rectangular gift. I hadn't gotten to eat lunch with all the police activity, so I immediately started tanking through the cookies, as if I had also skipped my last 5 meals. After my 4th cookie, I decided to wipe the crumbs from my hands and see what the mystery gift was. I unceremoniously ripped the red and gold metallic paper off of what appeared to be a small photo album bound in black vinyl. I opened it with giddy curiosity and felt the blood empty from my face. It was a timeline of photos of Marion Cliffington's family. These weren't the fun family get-togethers I had recrafted at the photo lab. I hadn't printed these at all. Page 1. Mitch and Gracie are propped against the arm of a tan leather sofa, daughter wrapped in father's arms. Their eyes are sunken and rolled backwards, and their tongues are lolled out of their mouths in an unnatural brown colour. There is dried spittle and yellow foam caught in Mitch's black stubble, and a mixture of blood and vomit on the front of Gracie's shirt. The blood vessels in their faces are a sickly blue, and their skin is pale and puffy. This photo is labelled, "Tuesday, Happy Birthday, Gracie." Page 2. The bodies are placed in a maroon 2013 Toyota RAV4. They've been cleaned up and posed. Mitch is in the front seat, Gracie in the centre back seat. Their skin has continued to swell so their eyes are puffy slits. Their now purple lips have been sewn shut and side-stitched into makeshift smiles. One of Mitch's arms is placed on the wheel, the other propped against the passenger seat in a pathetic wave. The label, Wednesday, taking Gracie to school. Page 3. The bodies are now dressed in swimsuits and are posed around a kiddie pool. Mitch had to be propped up in an unknown manner that is cleverly hidden from the frame. He's on his knees at the edge of the pool in blue and white Hawaiian shorts. Gracie is in the pool, positioned on her belly in a striped pink one-piece bathing suit and a matching swim skirt. Their hands are duct taped together and their skin has taken on a sickly yellow colour. They are starting to bruise and darken in areas which they have evidently been placed for too long. The label? Thursday, teaching Gracie to swim. Page 4. Mitch is now dressed in a handsome ivory tuxedo which has a few off-colour stains where his skin is starting to split open. He is at the kitchen table with a full glass of white wine and a lit dining candle in front of him. The sleeves on his arms reveal dark bruising where the tape was wrapped around his daughter's arm the day before. Gracie is not in this picture, but Mariam is. She is grasping one of his rotting hands in one of her own, with a brimming glass of red wine on the other. She wears a motherly smile that sickeningly matches the sewn-on smile her lifeless son now wears. The label? Friday, dinner with a boy. Page 5. Gracie is propped up against the wall, the skin of her arms ripped off where the tape was 2 days prior. Her face is beginning to lose its humanity, but is now coated in makeup worthy of a Little Miss Sunshine pageant. Her straw blonde hair is curled and bouncy, and her artificial smile is beginning to tear along the stitching. Next to her is an assortment of porcelain dolls, each made up and dressed with care that is a bit too sophisticated for a 5-year-old girl. To the far left of the frame, Mariam's reflection can be seen in a full-body mirror, pointing the camera at the twisted salon she constructed. The label? Saturday, Girls' Night Out. Page 6. There is finally a full frame of the house in which this sickening family montage was photographed. It is a modest, one-story home on the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The paint is a simple white, and it is beginning to flake from a simple picket fence that marks the perimeter. There are no other homes close by that are visible from the angle of the shot. In the left of the frame, the stables of the prized horses Mariam mentioned are visible in the background. The gates are wide open, and the horses are nowhere to be seen. Police cars, ambulances, and yellow crime scene tape blocks the rest of the view, except for the mailbox. The address on the mailbox? 6312 Prospect Road. The sides of the frame indicate motion blur and plastic paneling. Mariam photographed this from a moving vehicle, likely from far away. The label reads, Sunday, the family gets to see policemen in action on Career Day. On the final page, Mariam is standing in front of my house with the package I had just opened. The label, Thursday, dropping off goodies for my favourite son. In that moment of realization, weakness took control of my body. Not just from the imagery I was subjected to, but from a sickening feeling that burned in my stomach and intestines. Words from earlier were ripping through my skull. You look just like my son. He and his daughter were found dead in Mariam's home last Friday, poisoned. I forced myself to scan the backgrounds of those horrible pictures. On the first day, in Grace's lap was the cookie tin I had just eaten from. This package was not from my mother. It was from a crazed mother who thought I was her son, guided to my home from the business card I gave her. Now, here we are. I don't think I have much time left. I'm starting to lose focus. My eyes are in a fervorous affair with the clock, and my focus is none the wiser. Maybe they'll get married and elope. I'll invite this dispatcher to the wedding if I make it through this. I vaguely realise that doesn't make sense, but I don't mind. I am so tired, and now I can't stop coughing. I think I hear sirens in the distance, but I'm not sure if the ambulance has a cure for vomiting blood. Someone is coming up the stairs. I have to go now. Mariam is here, and she wants to give Gracie swimming lessons.